This is a tutorial on Nikto. Nikto is an open source web server scanner which performs comprehensive tests against web servers for multiple items, including over 6,100 potential dangerous files and CGIs. It checks for outdated versions on over 950 servers and version-specific problems on over 260 servers. It also checks for server configuration items such as the presence of multiple index files, HTTP server options, and will attempt to identify and install web servers and software. Scan items and public plugins are frequently updated and can be automatically updated. For this demonstration, I will be using my Ubuntu 9.1 desktop system. However, Nikto can be run on any other Linux or Windows system. There are two ways to installing Nikto. The first is using Perl, and the other one is just a simple sudo install. For this demonstration, we will be using the Perl install simply because there are more Nikto modules to play with. To install Nikto using the Perl module, the first thing you must do is install Perl on your system. And to that, you can simply navigate to your terminal, and you can type in sudo apt get install Perl. It'll ask you for your password. You hit enter and it'll begin installing Perl. As you can see, Perl is already installed on my system and it's upgraded to the newest version. Now that Perl is installed, we can begin downloading Nikto and unzipping and then using Perl to use it. The first thing we're going to need to do is to download the version 2.1.1 GZ file, not the BZ2 file. And you're going to save this file. Actually, we're going to go to our preferences, and we're going to ask where to save files, and then we're going to do this again. We're going to save this file to not to our downloads folders, but to our file system. Nikto will have begun downloading, and if you view your downloads folder, it should have already downloaded. Now you need to navigate and find your Nikto folder. To do that, we'll go to our terminal and we'll begin searching. Actually, we're going to cd out of this, and we're going to get into our vadmin folder. And we're going to go to our downloads, and we're going to do an ls-out. There is our Nikto file. So what we're going to do to unzip the file, we're going to do a tar command, which is pretty simple. You type in tar -zx vf, and then the file that you wish to unpack, which will be Nikto current .tar.gz. These files will then become unpacked. You will do an ls-l, and as you can see, Nikto is now unpacked and installed. Now we need to navigate to that folder, -2.1.1, and we'll do an ls-l, and there's our Perl run file that we can use to run Nikto, To run Nikto, it's pretty simple. You type in perl nikto.pl, and there is your Nikto command prompt. As you can see, no host is specified, so I haven't specified any target for it to begin scanning, but this will just give you a basic gist of the commands that you can go through and do. I'm going to be explaining some of these commands and showing you what you can do with them. One of the basic commands that you can do with Nikto is simply scanning any type of target that you give it for any type of service running on it. I have an Apache server running on an Ubuntu 9.04 desktop, and if I enter its IP, Nikto will easily just scan that target and begin looking for servers using the -host command. Pretty much, I will type in perl nikto.pl -host and then the IP of my target 10.50.209.156. I enter, and as you can see, it looks up my target IP, it gives it the host name, it gives it the port. Nikto by default will scan on port 80. I will actually explain in detail if you wish to target other ports other than 80, but Nikto by default scans on port 80. And as you can see, it has picked up an Apache server on that system that I just targeted. It's showing some of the HTTP methods that's on that system, and it even can show that my Apache server is outdated and it should be running the most current. So it can show you some easily vulnerabilities of that system. As you can see, when it's finished testing, it'll say one host tested, and these are all of the return values that you get from that search. There are other commands that Nikto can do besides your simple -host command, which searches your target IP for different web servers. If you would like to learn, you can also use the -port command, which will scan for different ports on a system. By default, Nikto only scans on port 80, but if you would like to use other ports, you can also scan for those as well. And by doing so, you type in perl nikto.pl, your host that you wish to target, 10.50.209.156, and then you will use the -port command. The -port command, as you see, has a plus next to it, which means it requires a value. Simply, I just put in the port that I wanted to search for. So in this instance, I'll search on port 443. I'll hit enter, and as you can see, it says no web server found on 10.50.209.156 on port 443. If I wish to scan a different variety of multiple ports instead of just one, I can do that as well. Instead of just searching on port 443, I can search on port 80 through port 100 and hit enter. And as you can see, it'll go through and it'll scan through ports 80 through 100 and didn't give me the return value of what they found on those ports. As you can see, like it found on port 80, it found the Apache server again. And it'll begin giving information. If you know that there are certain servers running on certain ports on your target, you can easily type in those ports. It'll make your search a lot easier. By default, you have to understand that Nikto only runs on port 80, so if the server is not running on port 80, you will not find it. So you might want to create a little few scripts that will search on multiple ports so you can get some feedback on those servers. One of the final things that I'll be showing you that you can do with Nikto is the output command. At any time during any one of your searches, you can have an output placed to a text file that you can easily read and access later. To use the output command, it would be just like any other extension that you would use with Nikto, and putting in simply your perl nikto.pl, your host that you're going to target, and then an output to a text file that you want to access. I'll call this one nikto1.txt, and as you see, it will go through and do its normal testing and giving you its normal information, but I'm going to stop the search just so I can show you that it piped it to a text file called nikto1.txt. And if I open with a gedit, there you can see my output. As you can see, I cut it off, but there's the output that it was giving me. This is my tutorial on using Nikto and 3 of its basic commands. If you have any questions, refer to the tech manual, or you can always use Google.